Hey everyone, this is D7 from D13 Airsoft, and today I am with D12 and our mutual friend, Zach. Now today we're going to be discussing, as you can probably tell by the title of the video, Chuck Heavy's Gunfighting Challenge, and this is essentially an AAR where we're going to go through a couple different topics from the event, talk a lot about each event, what we did to build up to it, things we liked, disliked, what type of equipment we used, and what are some lessons learned from it. Starting off, Chuck Heavy's Gunfighting Challenge. So what this is an event started by Range 51 in Mountain City, Tennessee. This is technically the third event. Nico, if you want to add on to that.
So third event, very first one was kind of just an experiment, really, above anything else.
What year was that?
Actually, it was either 2020 or 2021. This is 2023, third game, second game. So it was 2021 when it started, yeah.
Okay.
So then 2022, third game, it had about 17 people with Zach involved.
Yeah,
it was about 17 people.
Yeah, I know it was at least around 15, if not a little bit more, but we didn't break over 20.
Then this year is technically the third event. Where we had 23 people, 22 actually competing, one just shooting for fun. The idea behind that is a different sponsor to the other two. And this one was a little different. It was more hands-on from the Range 51 staff themselves. Supposed to be in remembrance of Chuck H. I don't think his last name was actually Heavy, but he was a former Navy SEAL, passed away in 2016. One of his mutual friends during that time was there helping plan, run, execute the event. So part of the event was, one, to remember him. Two, the admissions and whatnot helped the range itself, which is growing in this annual competition. And three, there was also a charity aspect of it that was happening behind the scenes. So there was a lot of great things happening there outside of anyone attending, actually getting fun and good training experience. So a lot of things happening at the same time. Very small, all things considered, but it is slowly growing each year. And I know, Nico, again, you were there the first year, and then from there, each of us started to get added on.
Yeah.
And this year, we're actually able to have all three of us there with some content for the channel. Now, with that said, moving on, prior to this event, what experience have you guys had in shooting competitions?
Range 51 skirmish was the only dedicated competition I've ever been to.
So this range and these series of events?
Yes.
Okay. Zach?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The only shooting competition that I have been to was to the one that I went last year for the second event. Other than that, I've never been in any other competition back in Utah. So.
Yep. And then for me, I did like 2 USPCA matches up in Alaska years ago. But outside of that, this was my first real, what many would call, say, a two-gun style match. For all of us, as you probably tell as we go through this, learning experience for us. You're watching this on the Airsoft channel, so there should be no surprise. But part of this is show our growth in this as well as years go on, because there was a lot of hard lessons learned, which is great. This is why you go to these type of events. Okay, so gear and loadouts for the event. So talk about your weapon, then your gear that you use, kind of broad terms. Zach?
The main weapon that I ended up taking, the rifle, is just an AR-15. It's got a few other enhancements.
This one right here?
Yeah, this one right over here. It started out just being plain old Jane, just a DPMS Panther. So honestly, a cheap build. It ran great throughout the entire event. Only has about 150 rounds through it. It's been great. The pistol that I have is a Glock 19 Gen 4 lower with a PSA dagger on top. It has a little adapter with it. That has a red dot attached to it. So this was the first event that I ran that had a red dot on the pistol.
And then what you did mention is you have a LPVO plus a red dot
Yes,
combo.
I have the LPVO and red dot combo on there on a prepper mount.
Yep. For weapons, Zach? D12?
So for a weapon, I have the Zasva M70 ZPAP. This is one of their more newer models.
And of course, obviously, 7.62 by 39.
By 39. I have a vertical foregrip from BCM. It's just nothing too fancy. And for optics, I have the Trijicon reflex sight and the 3x magnifier. Yep.
And then another addition is you had a foldable stock, which we'll talk about later.
Yes. Yeah, and foldable stock, yeah.
And what was your handgun?
It was a SIG P226, specifically a Mark 25 model.
Okay. And then for my weapon, I had a 11.5-inch AR. I did have a SOCOM Mini-2 suppressor on it, and then the ACOG and RMR combo. And then I had a SIG M17 standard iron sights. For gear, obviously, I'm going to have the 360 pan we did earlier, the range day before, showing that. But generally speaking, Zach, what did you have?
I just had I don't remember brand, but it's basically just a plain Jane plate carrier. I had about 5 for the rifle, 2 for the pistol, a couple of pouches. I had my IFAK that was out on the back. And I don't believe I ran with the knee pads or the helmet this year that I had in the gear. I decided to join it.
Yeah, the only reason you had that Airsoft helmet was if you're going to use Outgo Pro, which wasn't necessary.
Basically, yeah. So that wasn't a necessity, but...
D12?
Smersh. I was the lone one of the group with the Russian gear.
The LBE Master Race. Correction.
Yes. LBE. But it was just slick back plate carrier.
That's right.
And then the low bearing belts, I got that from you, and that was also SSPSON.
Yeah.
And then that's with 9 magazines from Magpul, South Korea, and Croatia.
And then, for me, I usually have my LBE, but it does not have a handgun on it right now. So for this, thinking I would have to have the handgun with the rifle for the 2 guns sections of this match, I went ahead and just used my range kit that I have. And that caused me to have a much more slimline kit than what I'm used to. Something I would add is I did have my, for iPro, my standard Airsoft iPro with my X-Fog tube in it. The weather was quite good and quite windy, so it wasn't much of an issue. But if that wind was gone or it would have gotten hotter, I think that would have been a bigger factor because a lot of people's glass would have started fogging. Okay, so one thing about this competition, before we start going to the events themselves, is us 3 did something very different. So out of the 23 people who were there who were going to compete, we did something that was kind of a purposeful sabotage to each other from a training standpoint. So for each of us, we took turns grabbing each other's magazines and loading them ourselves with a random amount of ammo. We tried our best not to screw with us and do like 4 rounds, but usually it was at least around 10 rounds, but less than 30. And what that did is cause us to have a random amount in our handgun and rifles that we did not know, forcing us to reload a lot. One event that bit us in the butt that we did change, Event 7, we'll talk about that one later. But what that led to and why we did that is we wanted to have that additional experience. We didn't think we were going to win this. We didn't care that much about the time. But we wanted to have that experience of, oh, shoot, what happened? Weapons out. Got to change under pressure now. And what I would add is if anyone looks at that and says, well, it's competition, you're trying to compete, why don't you just do that in dry fire practice at home? I would say one example that happened during this event, and I'll talk about it more later, is something that I constantly train for when it comes to reloads fell through under the stress of a timer. And that's coming from someone who, well, I guess I'll explain it now, but essentially every time I reload, whether it be dry firing from an actual rifle, going to a range, or even an airsoft game using M4 style platforms, I always, and I mean always, grab the empty magazine, have that retention accountability for it, and I will stick it in that dump pouch. When I was out here, despite religiously doing this all the time in my training, the second I was under the shot timer, I was like, grab it, got that accountability, visually see it, and I would drop it right in front of me where I knew I can pick it up later. And I immediately go for the other mag. Like, I just need that mag. I just need that mag right now and get it afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And for me, it's like, well, wait a minute. I spent all this time training a certain way, and then under stress, it fell through. Is that something I should continue to train or train differently now? And that is now something I would never have found just doing that in my basement somewhere doing dry firing practice.
Oh, yeah.
Next question. So we talked about our gear and weapons. What are some highlights that you saw of the gear weapons used by the other 22 to 23 participants at this event? Zach?
The first one was initiated from that really awesome guy immigrated in from Austria, was the plate carrier that had the quick detach. Because I always loathe the once we go to take it off, I have to reach over and pull up on the whole thing. If I got mags in there, it doesn't.
Is there any kit you saw others using that you thought, hey, I should get that? Like you mentioned the quick release. Anything else?
I did see kind of the transitioning because my scope's a second focal plane of maybe just dropping down the money and at least getting maybe a more cheaper version of the first focal plane and dropping the red dot maybe a little bit because I did have some issues of when I was moving up under stress trying to find the red dot while the other guy who used the Strike Eagle said that he could just bring that up every time and use it, and he was fairly new to it. Other than that, I think I was running nearly just about everything that everybody else was between slings and carriers and whatnot.
Very simplistic equipment. So as in it was a plate carrier. They built their kits around speed and simplicity. So that means belt with no knickknacks, 2 or 3 magazines in your holster. That's it. And then 3 more or 4 more magazines in the plate carrier. All kinds of equipment. Period. In a very fun and safe environment.
Yeah, I would say hands down, you had the most thorough loadout out of anyone there.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll bleed into mine. If I'm going to speak about, I'll start with weapons first. So, primary weapons used by everyone was almost exclusively AR-15s, except for D12 if it's a Stava. There was one guy in full World War II parachute.
82nd Airborne.
Yep, with a M1 carbine, which is really cool. And everyone respected him for it. There's a guy we met there named Eddie. He had a Springfield Hellion. That was interesting to see. Mm-hmm. And then there was one guy we saw there with a AR with like a really thin pencil barrel. And we think it was a PCC with like the stand mag conversion. But outside of that, like of the 22, like 18 guys had AR-15s. Mm-hmm. I mean, that should come no surprise here in the U.S., especially how good the platform is. But it's interesting how there was almost no variation there. As for optics, what I saw, there were a lot of EOTechs with about a 50-50 shot of them having a magnifier or not. Mm-hmm. I was surprised how many guys had LPVOs. I know when it comes to kind of the tactical community, thinking combat or whatever, a lot of guys like the ACOGs for the durability. They like the EOTech for their night vision capability and then pairing with the magnifier. And then comes the LPVO. But honestly, out of all of them, I think the LVOs were tying, if not slightly more than the EOTechs out there, which took me by surprise. And then there were only two people with irons. One was the guy with the M1 carbine, and the other was someone who had an optic breakdown on them at one point. Yeah. But outside that, no one was using irons. Barrel length for all these ARs was at least 14.5 to 16. I didn't see any 20-inchers, and honestly, I was probably one of the few who had a shorter barrel like this. And quite frankly, it didn't matter. So, I mean, we'll talk about that later, but yeah, there's a reason why no one said, maybe I should get, SPR. Didn't really need it, I would say another 6 or so had suppressed ARs, which I thought was pretty cool. For handguns, Glocks were king, then quickly followed by SIG P320/M17s, and then power gap everything else. I know one guy had a Smith & Wesson, a guy had a 365 variant, and then you with your 226. Yeah. And outside of that, I mean, there really wasn't any close third. I will say, because of past events, how you guys are talking about, I purposely did not bring my 21-round mags for my SIG. I saw a lot of guys with extended Glock mags who didn't care. And I don't mean like the 33 rounds, but like the 21 rounders and whatnot. So that I did notice. I also saw a lot of guys with optics on handguns. Yeah. And I know you're the only one of the three that did, so maybe later on you can talk about that. Yeah. Tactical gears, as we talked about, a lot of guys had plate carriers and slick plate carriers and very slimline like range battle belts. I would say about 40 to 60 ratio, so around 40% of them out there actually had body armor, which I thought was a pretty decent amount, actually. I think it was great to see a lot of guys actually humping out there with the body armor. Last comment I had about tactical gear others are wearing is, obviously this is a competition. It is only for one day and a very specific set of things. But also with this having a kind of special forces tent behind those who planned the event, both in past years and this one, there was a big stress on kind of the training, how you fight mentality. So again, stressing Nico is probably the only one there with like a full-fledged loadout where he had equal to or above average combat load for his rifle. He did have the handgun and magazines. He had like 2 liters of water on him. He had a place for an IFAC if he needed to, right? I mean, like most...
The helmets.
yeah, correct. Yeah. Most guys didn't have helmets. Most guys didn't have any place for comms, water, knives, even enough rifle mags past 2 or 3. And quite frankly, because I was not using my LB, I fell under that as well. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we kind of saw what others are using. Was there anything you saw others doing that was like they screwed up, it wasn't a good idea, you didn't like the idea behind it, it didn't help them in the competition? I got a couple if you don't.
Go ahead and start. I might have to think about
it. So first off, we mentioned before, but like iron sights, it was only used in emergency for one person for the rifle, and it screwed him up bad. Another one was one of the guys did not lube his handgun or rifle before the event, and his handgun jammed on him twice at stage 4.
I remember that.
Another one, for the guys who had red dots or EOTechs with no magnifiers, don't get me wrong, EOTech's great. I've used them for years as well. But no magnification for a couple of those shots would have been kind of tricky. But if you know your holds, you'll be fine. One thing I thought was interesting, and it's not really relevant in today's era, but with modernization of Kevlar helmets and better adjustment systems, but the guy in the World War II kit, he had a steel pot helmet on, and before he even started his first event, he already had the chin strap unstrapped. And we're kind of joking around. I was like, And eventually the topic started as we saw him shoot was like, hey, he's doing all right, but it's kind of funny that the helmet's already unstrapped. And we're talking like, well, historically, a lot of the guys did that because sometimes the stovepipe helmet would cover your eyes. And the second we said that, he went prone at one of the stages and immediately just took the helmet off because when he went prone, his helmet started to cover his eyes. And it's like, obviously not really relevant now, but there's a reason why they transitioned away from that. One of the guys out there, Eddie, he did have an Uncle Mike's holster. The holster did its job, but what was important is when he had a reholster for stage 5, I think, in the vehicle, he did have a lot of time sitting there pulling the strap back out and snapping it back into place. Almost everyone else either had a slip-into leather holster or Kydex. And then the last thing I saw of some people were, I noticed for all 3 of us, we never had mag drop issues, right?
No.
Yeah, but other people, and the funny part was it was always the first mag that they had before the match started, meaning, okay, shooter, you ready? Lock and load. Ready? Go. And sometimes they'll get the first shot off, sometimes they won't when they're moving to the projective, rifle, and pistol. It would always be that magazine coming out. And that happened, I think, 3 or 4 times. But the interesting part is if they ever had the reload during the match, I never saw them drop the mag after that. So I'm not sure what was going on. Maybe because guys had the bolt closed on some of them, and then they would slide it back.
Full magazines.
Yeah, I don't know, but it got a lot of them. Anything else for this? Okay, so going into the actual events, we had 8 events we went through. Let's start with event 1. I'll describe each event, and then you guys talk about kind of anything you want to add about your experience with it, and then we'll talk about likes or dislikes, anything you would change or maybe not change. So event 1 was actually our second event because they did 2 events at the same time, which was the ammo crate. So the idea is you start ready to fire. You have an ammo crate, roughly 30 to 40 pounds, and you had to take it to a murder hole board. It had 3 layers. One's on top, one in the middle, and one low to the ground in almost a prone position. Fire from that position at a steel target around 150 yards, I think.
150 is around.
Yeah, it wasn't 200. So 150, hit it twice with your rifle. This is a rifle-only event. Go to a piece of plywood set up about 10 yards to the right, carrying the ammo crate, do the same thing. Then you go to an X-shape, kind of like a tank trap. A tank trap. And then you shot from there again, drag it back to the mortar hole, and do the same thing now in the medium positions. We kind of have to crouch, do all 3, come back again, and then you lay prone at the murder hole, and then come back, do all 3, and then you're done. If you do it perfectly, 18 rounds with the rifle. Zach, how did you go with that?
Considering that was technically the second one that we did, I was already feeling a little bit exhausted on the first. So, as a great many people say, cardio or die was very important with that. I really enjoyed it. That fatigue set in, especially on that third set. The paint designations, that's what they had to mention for targets. I think that was a fantastic way. Because I think there was a couple of incidences where people shot the wrong targets.
Yeah, so that was... let me explain it for the viewers. So what they're talking about is, for that event, they had blue spray paint on the top of each bunker you're going to, and there was only one blue target at 150 yards. So the idea is their color code association only shoot at that one. And then the other event for that was red target. So,
pink, yeah.
Pink, you're right.
One, yes.
Okay, D12?
So, being able to move to the 3 different areas was just fine. Fatigue setting in was just fine, but also getting down into prone with my setup having a magazine longer than the foregrip. It was trying to find the right balance, which is why I kind of mixed a match with 20-rounder and 30-rounder depending on what I needed to do. But with that 20-rounder meant that I have to hit every single target in order for it to make sense. So that is an issue.
For me, that was the first time I noticed my reload issue as well. Outside of that, I did fine overall with the shots. I used my ACOG only, not my RMR, especially at 150 yards. The only thing I would add to it, not to change anything in the event, but what I noticed is the top of the ammo can has that standard handle that collapses onto itself because of the 2 links on it. Everyone was constantly grabbing that first. And when I first did it, I grabbed it too. But people need to remember on the side of an ammo can, not just is there the lip you can move to open it up, but there's also a small wire handle that actually sticks out in place if you let it stick out in place. So all these guys are dropping them and getting fatigued and trying to scramble, trying to find this little handle that's flat against the top of the ammo can. After that first time I dropped it, I just opened up that side wire and just held it horizontally the whole time.
Because you were talking about when you ended up going into the prone position, since you and me are running red dots on top of our optics, when you went prone, you said you were only using the ACOG?
Correct.
Did you ever try to think about possibly using the RMR once you went down to get a little bit up, or was it just ACOG for you? Because up, except for the other event, which had the 200, I actually ended up using my red dot for nearly about everything that was within that 100 to 150 yards for the most part. But second focal plane, I had mine set to 6. But when I hit the prone, I found it difficult that I had to choose between whether if I was going to try to find it on the scope at max magnification at 6x and try to find the target, or to try and get my head up to get the red dot on there. But I could tell going prone, I was actually a very uncomfortable position once I had it up to try and raise my head up from the fatigue and from everything else.
For my armor, I treat it as a 50-yard in shot instead of a 100-yard in. And then my ACOG, I am very confident with that crosshatch reticule. So I really did like that, being able to magnify and just take the shot. Outside of that was event 1. Event 2, which first is one we actually started with, was the water can. So there's actually quite a few things happening there. So you start at a spray painted square in the ground. You run to this elevated position that's supposed to simulate like the roof of a house.
Rooftop, yeah.
It's about 6 feet off the ground. You climb up on top of it at this 45-degree angle, and you take a shot, if you want to, on top of the tiles. And there's a metal like monkey bar about 2 feet above it. We'll get to that monkey bar later, but you can just shoot on the tile if you want, using that as an extra layer of support. Take your 2 shots at a target around 150 yards away. You then drop down, and there are 2 half-filled water jugs. I think each one is probably 25 pounds.
Yeah.
If they filled up all the way, they would have been like 40, 45 pounds. But you grab each one. Again, you better have a good sling, and hey, you better have it adjustable, because if not, it's going to be banging around on you. Grab the 2 water cans, take it about 15 yards to a new bunker, which is roughly at a crouching position. Take another shot at that same target, again around 150 yards. Then leave the water gallons there, run about 25 yards to a spool that had an elevated platform underneath it. And the idea was above the spool, and you can lean on it if you want, you shoot at a 200-yard target twice, and then you go underneath the spool in a prone position, same target, 200 yards. Run back to that medium bunker, 2 more shots at that original target, grab the water cans again, go back to the rooftop, and then climb back on the rooftop, and this time you have to actually get on top of over the monkey bar. So you're kind of exposing yourself, but what causes you to do is not have that extra support kind of lift you up until you get to that bar, and then you can take 2 more shots, and then you're done. So kind of a lot of things happening there. If you do everything perfectly, 12 rounds with the rifle, but really, really interesting. So, Zach?
I did find that event very interesting. The slope on the roof actually was very important. Was one of them ended up pointing out one of the RSOs. When I was coming down, I was trying to make sure that I wasn't going to slide off. I could feel my gear kind of shifting a little bit from coming in at the incline, and one of them said, "Hey, watch your muzzle." So that was very good that they were aware of that, of where the muzzle was pointing. Now, granted, I had it pointed up in the air. I still had it safe, but coming down on that incline, so that was really good. But everybody basically shot the same way. I'm pretty sure I saw everybody on that first one all went down and used that tile basically as a support.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing for the middle one and the spool on the top and the bottom. Now the 200 yard with the LPVO at 6 was fantastic because I brought that up, got it on target, 2 shots down, hit.
Did you miss anything for that round?
I don't believe so. Not the 200 yard. I believe I did miss 1 shot at the 100, 150 yard target. That I did miss while using the red dot, but I knew that I pulled the shot on there, so I followed up very quickly with another target on hit. I think the only thing that I had issues with that was more the communication of the RSOs, because like you said, you ran over to the spool and that. I believe, if I recall, I picked up the water jugs, carried it out to the spool, and then did the 2 shots, and then picked him up and brought him back. But then I was told to leave the water jugs at that second one and just run back to the roof tile. But I swear that they said that you would carry the water jugs you'd carry the water jugs basically
back to
all the way over and back, and then there was another one of like you said, where you went down to the spool without the water jugs and then brought them back. So that was probably one thing, is probably more clarity on the rules, because there was a lot of people asking questions even while people were running, because we saw one person do one onto the other. Other than that, I really liked it. It got you moving up and down different barricades. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, D12, what do you think?
So, our first event 2, I didn't take my approach as aggressive as I would like to have, or as I should have, because there's only 2 parts of that roof that are actually be stabilized for actual to step on and to rest on.
Outside of friction. Did they have 2 boards?
Yeah, outside of friction. I did not make an aggressive enough approach to actually land on the outside friction, so I was fumbling up safely, trying to get in position.
So I would like to talk about that some more, because it's interesting, because 90% of the time, I'm also using LBE similar to you, right? And something that I've already dealt with, but I forgot you haven't, is how much weight an LBE is on the waist and how you deal with that. Because with an LBE, you still want to be able to integrate body armor a little bit. So what happens is you have this LBE system, and this is great about like slick body armor versus like the IOTVs that a lot of militaries have, where they're much bulkier, is you're able to get the LPV just a little higher off your waist, and then you would make sure you have pouches where you don't have everything covering up to like your groin and crotch area, and you have it further to your sides. Because if you don't, you have a lot of issue of leg room when you're running and going high above stuff. And when I saw you go before any of us, and you were struggling up that roof, I was like, is this roof really that steep? I thought, oh wait, no, he has the LB and he's readjusted. And again, like if I was out there with my LB, I would have forgotten that was an issue too. So and again, no one else is doing that, so that was an interesting thing to see.
Yep. Another equipment issue was that I was shooting corrosive ammunition the other day. That meant I had to take this thing apart, including the Zastava brand scope mount that is attached to the receiver. I love this thing to death. When I have everything sighted in, it sits tight and it's perfect. But because I have to take this off every single time, that means the Trijicon has to be adjusted ever so slightly.
So I will say to this, I'm not an AK guy, I don't know enough about this, but that is a Zastava brand mount. We have not put it on paper since the competition to confirm this.
Yeah.
How confident are you that the Zero was messed up when you took that off?
I was very confident because it was predictably 2 clicks down. Okay. So every single time that I take this thing off and put it back on is just shy low. It wasn't veering off left or right. It is predictably shy low, and I forgot to adjust it before the game. However, that was at the cost of shooting 5 rounds, hitting 2 more, and then I was dry, so that's when I had to do an emergency reload at that point in time, because whoopsie daisy, I had my dump pouch sealed up. After that point, sliding off, and the rest of the match was very fine.
Okay. And then for me, with this being my first one, roof was an issue. Getting a little bit of jello legs with the water cans, essentially going up that hill beginning of the game. What I did have an issue with was with that 200-yard target. So with all of you guys, your ammunition that you zero these rifles on, you pretty much use. For you and me, Zach, we use 55 grain. Nico, you use your
123, either brass or steel, and casing. And there is a difference between.
Yeah, but brands. You use brass for the competition.
I use brass.
Yeah. Now for me, I zero my 11.5 with 62 grain with that suppressor on. I do take into account what its zero hold is, suppressed or unsuppressed. But building up to this event, I checked my 55 grain hold. I didn't change the zero, but I checked the difference. And within 100 yards to 120 yards, I was like, yeah, it's a little more spread out. 11.5, 5.5, 55 grain isn't the greatest, but it'll be fine for this competition because I know we're not going out to like 300 yards or something.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, and then the day before, we went to the range again, and that was 120 yards. I was like, yep, hitting steel, looking good. And for some reason, when I went to that 200 yard, went prone, ready to go with the ACOG, I missed like 4 or 5 times immediately. And the guy was like, hey, you're shooting too far to the right. I was like, all right, low left, started hitting. And that's what I had to do for the rest of the competition. Within the 100 yards, no issue. But after that, yeah, I had to be careful. And that was a big one for me. And bleeding later on to gear changes, hey, again, maybe short barrel rifles is all cracked up to be, especially if you want to train how you fight, but the ammunition you have can't even be used at a lot of competitions, right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. Okay, going into event 3, this was the offhand run, of which I got the offhand Sam award. So, we'll talk about that in scores later. So what that award's supposed to mean, I think the way we talked about it is I think it means I was the technically 5th fastest in that event because the top 4 overall scores got individual awards.
Yeah.
But then everyone else got individual awards if they were the best in that specific event. So I think for me, I was like essentially the 5th fastest because those other 4 guys probably beat me. But how this one worked, if you did everything right, it was only 10 rounds of your rifle. You start back on the roof, run up to the roof, fire twice at a target. I guess it was 150 feet, 150 yards again.
Yeah.
Then after that, you run forward to the right, down like a, not a 45-degree slope, but it was pretty steep.
Oh, yeah.
Going straight down to a car, and at the hood of the car, you have to transition to your offhand to shoot that same target. Then go in the back of the trunk of the car, shoot normally, run back up another hill that's about half that size at a bunker, and then after you shoot at that pallet bunker, you then, right next to it is a literal ladder.
Ladder.
That the RSO is holding down to make sure you don't flip it over. And you have to climb up onto the ladder until you're tall enough to look over it and take a shot 2 more times at it. So the idea was a bunch of different heights, a lot of cardio, and offhand. So that was a lot of dynamic stuff to it that I really liked. Zach, how did that go for you?
Pretty good. Honestly, I think one of the best advice I got was, I believe, from the, I think it was Paula, the woman there. She gave me the best advice out of that, which is don't think about it when it was going for the offhand, because I was so worried about that because it's the first time shooting this rifle, this setup, everything. It would have been the first one on the left hand.
You never practiced that before.
No, I haven't. I tried it with my Springfield Saint. That operates differently than this one because I have a shorter post and I have the angled foregrip. It is different compared to this rifle that I took. However, when she said don't think about it, I was like, okay, I need to stop stressing about it because that was the part that was getting me. And I actually kind of canted it a little bit for the red dot, and I put 2 rounds on target perfectly. And
you told?
I had fun. So, so the one advantage of this, of being the only guy with the folding stock on here, was that offhand shooting was offhand shooting. So, yep, I do the roof scene again. But once I got to the car, all I did was I just quickly folded the stock, and I just put the rifle in front of my face, but I just have my left hand, and I just switched hands.
Did you use your magnifier?
Since I was that close, no, I just used the red dot, and so, but because now I'm not that stabilized, it cost me a couple more shots, but I like to counter that out with yes, I took more shots, but my transition was a lot faster, so I took those shots, and then I moved. I kept the stock folded, shifted to the right-hand side, gave my shots, and then that's when I just flicked it back into action so that I can go to the bunker. Bunker was just fine. And the ladder, what I found was absolutely, too perfect for me, was that climbed up to the ladder, and once I set the rifle down, I was actually able to anchor the rifle between the slats, so that way the magazine fit absolutely perfect between the 2 sides. And I was able to, it was either, and because I had this foregrip right here, I was able to pull it back on the rifle so that way I had something to brace on it. So I had the magazine hook coming forward and then the front grip on the front, and I was able to just hold on and keep brace and do the 2 shots.
Was the stock folded?
Stock was not folded by then.
Yeah, now for me, I started with the ACOG on the roof, and then after that I used my RMR for all of it, because at that point, once you get down to the car, it's right at around 100 yards at the target. Yeah, and I would say it was one of the few times I felt very comfortable in the first couple of matches actually using the RMR. RMR is supposed to be a 100-yard in. I treated it more like a 50-yard in for a lot of times because even the slightest variation I was missing. I still need to get used to my RMR being higher of a bore, and my chin not hitting the buttstock as much. But that time I did it, and it worked really well. Now, something else as well, I did practice on my own transitioning to the left hand before. I know for years in Airsoft, what I would do with guns that had no recoil is I would do, for just quick engagements, I would just transition shoulders like this and just look and shoot. That is really sucky to do without proper training with a real gun. And after doing that for a couple of training sessions on my own in the past year and a half, I went to just completely going to the left side. And the very second I did that, I was like, I'm hitting the target. Like, this isn't bad. Like, make sure you have your weapon zeroed. You know your weapon. When you start doing it and you actually go all the way, it's way more achievable than I thought, right?
Well, and you gave me the advice for that. That's what I took, because you said, hey, don't try to just shoulder it.
Yeah.
Just swap it. And that made a world of a difference, because unlike riding with your left hand, being able to pull a trigger and just keep it steady over on that left was easier than I thought. It's still something I highly recommend practicing. You're never going to know when you're going to have that, but it felt almost a little bit natural to go to that in comparison of shifting the whole rifle over and trying to...
Okay, and then I had no changes on how that event was executed. I liked the event a lot.
Oh, yeah, it was great. I hope that they do something like that again.